The second part, as we said, is about how to intelligently understand and interpret it. Because again, you may be feeling discomfort, but it may be very difficult to understand, if that discomfort is anxiety or is apathy, and then not just that, but where is it coming from, right? Where is it connected to? The objective in that sense is to really be able to more clearly identify what's happening for you and understand it better in terms of causes or just its characteristics. Things to be aware of: it's subjective. So you may have a similar feeling, sensation, emotion that in one moment, because of particular circumstances, you'll interpret one way, and in another moment, you'll interpret it a different way. Sometimes it can be helpful to touch base with people who know you well and who you trust to get some insight. My husband sometimes is very good at seeing from the outside, and in that safe relationship that we have, being able to say, well, I think, this happened last time, this was the case with you, a pattern that I might not have seen, or I see you react this way usually when these kinds of other elements are there. So I think it may be that. Remember that it's always up to you to decide what you're feeling, but having a bit of insight from trusted loved ones can also give some insight on that. It also depends then on your ability to see things objectively. We touched on this a little bit in the previous call, but this idea of, if you're always in this loop, what we call sometimes this emotional sabotage of just going down the rabbit hole and feeling what you're feeling without being able to kind of create a little bit of distance, then it's almost impossible to be able to also reflect on what's happening to you. So it actually is possible to be feeling something deeply, but still reserve a certain part of your consciousness to look back on yourself. We call it the fly in the wall or the zoom camera, but just it's a muscle like anything else that if you start to practice a little bit more will actually become easier. And again, self-knowledge. The more that you learn about how you work, and also remember that how you work now will likely have been different than how you worked before or how you might work in the future. These are not things that we, as we say, marry ourselves to. Those are not judgments about you. It's just the person I am right now is functioning in this way, and that's okay, right? So how do you do this? How do you get a better idea of what exactly is happening for you and why? As we said, know your emotional profile, right? If you are sensitive to certain things, if you are going contextually through certain particular situations right now that you know are difficult for you, if there are relationships that you keep trying to uphold that aren't working for you, all these different things will help you understand how your particular way of feeling and feeling things and what you're feeling becomes relevant for you, right? And again, really no judgment here. Everybody's different. We all have a different emotional signature at any one moment in time, just like we have different color hair, different specialties and strengths, etc. The idea is aesthetic as well as also take into account the emotional context. If you are, which we are right now, going through an especially challenging moment, you already have a certain excuse about what may be causing you to feel some complex emotions. But again, consider other things. It's not always you, right? When it comes to stress and it comes to emotions, there's the part that is how you're dealing with things. And another thing is what you're having to deal with. So I'll give you an example of mine. I'm very sensitive, I've realized over the last years, to cruelty and injustice. And so while I used to force myself to watch, the typical Netflix shows, etc., I just started to realize that I can't stomach it very well. It affects how I sleep, especially since we tend to watch this more in the evenings. And especially during moments when there's a lot of other stuff going on, I just feel like it's taking more away from me than it's giving. This is not an objective judgment on these kinds of TV shows. For other people, they represent a great escape, but for me, they don't. And so I just, without apology, starting saying, I'm not going to watch this kind of stuff anymore. I know sometimes also that sleep is really critical for me. And so I've also had to learn that I go to sleep early, especially during stressful moments. And if I got to get 10 hours, that's what I'm going to do. Right? So the more you know how you're functioning and the more you know how situational factors affect you, the better you can also manage and understand what's happening. The third part is also not to overanalyze. It's great to get more insight about how you work, what you're experiencing at any one moment in time. But if you're overanalyzing yourself on a regular basis, it also becomes obsessive and frustrating. There's actually great research that's shown that people who spend too much time trying to get happy are the least happy people, right? So it's just the idea of kind of don't overdo it. It's great to check in, but the rest of the time, let yourself live, right? Just go back to living and going on it. And the balance between these two things is key. And the last part also is don't judge, as we've said before, and don't intellectualize. And I'd like to go in a little bit into more detail what that means. Not judging means that if you're having a moment where you're feeling anger, that doesn't necessarily make you an angry person. If you have a moment of envy or jealousy, that doesn't necessarily mean that globally as a fixed trait, you are a jealous or an envious person. If you're seeing these things coming up for you on a regular basis, that's something to be worked with. But this idea of really be careful that because you feel something in one moment doesn't mean that that is a characteristic or a quality that you have to fight with or justify for the rest of your life. The human experience is nuts, okay? We are all, though very few of us want to admit it, we are all thinking and feeling crazy shit a lot of the time. Let me tell you, as a coach, you hear people's stories. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, I'm so sorry I'm crying in a session, or I'm so sorry, whatever. And I say to them, I've cried more than you than last week. You know, at the end of the day, there's so much going through us. That's why it's so beautiful we can't read each other's minds, right? Because that's part of the human experience. That's okay. So over judging every single thing that goes through your head is just going to cause you grief. And again, it's going to take away a lot of energy, much needed energy, and focus on things that are really important and reflections that will really help you out. Intellectualizing means not actually allowing yourself to enter a feeling. That's, it's great to get some objectivity. If you are particularly kind of afraid or hesitant to look at your emotions, it's great to start from an intellectual perspective, kind of trying to explain as if you were giving a talk about what might be going on with you. But the problem with intellectualizing above and beyond and never actually letting yourself feel a feeling is that you won't get the results you're looking for. You may get some clarity, but you can't really work through an emotion or grow from emotions if you're not willing to actually tap into what they are, if you're not allowing yourself to actually feel it. And that's what brings us to the last part, because a lot of people are going to say, screw you, Nev, how much more anxiety can it take, right? So here's a couple of things when it comes to managing emotions effectively. Okay, again, as we said, it's not controlling, it's not squeezing it. Imagine trying to squeeze in your palm a whole lot of sand, right? You can't hold it all, it starts to seep out. And again, when we try to do that with emotions, not only are we repressing them, but we're also putting undue pressure on ourselves to exert a kind of control that actually, I think, doesn't exist to that degree, right? You'll actually find that to be able to manage, flow with it, a mixture of accepting it and trying to understand it a bit and then working to channel it is a lot more effective than trying to, in this black and white, rigorous way, control it as if it was, a project. So the other thing about it too is it's not about repressing either. We do some work here recently, which I really love. And if you're interested, let me know. It's called shadow work. It comes from Carl Jung, famous psychologist you all know. And the idea of shadow work is this idea that there's a great amount of ourselves that has been repressed in the process of growing up, right? We had to be socialized. And so that means that our caregivers, parents, but also educators and the like, kept giving us messages around what's okay to have, right? You can't be angry, you can't fight, you shouldn't be jealous, you should be hardworking, right? So to some degree, this process is very important. On the other hand, in the process of being socialized, we've also been taught to repress and push away parts of us ourselves that as we get older become important to reintegrate again. Things like it actually is okay to feel jealousy and envy sometimes.